Okay, so hi everyone. Today I have Amos Wollen with me. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Amos Wollen. um, I am a first year undergrad studying philosophy and theology. In my spare time, I just research philosophy a lot. I do like an odd bit of publishing. I mainly that's because I don't want to be homeless when I'm an academic, and the only way to succeed in academia is to have like a bunch of papers published. So yeah, I think there's one we're going to be talking about today about Pascal's wager.
Yeah. I suppose like my first question is like, what kind of music bands you love?
I'm really into piano, but like really fast, impressive piano. I've also gone into this thing when I'm writing my theology essays. I need theology, so I've just been listening to Gregorian chant. I feel like monk singing in Latin is just what I need to get me through my essays.
So, I mean, are you theist?
As of a week ago, yes. So no arguments had really swung me from either to atheist or to theist. I was an agnostic. But then I came across Dustin Crummett and Brian Cutter's new argument from psychophysical harmony, and I've been thinking about that for a couple of months. And then I think at 12:05 a.m. on Tuesday last week, it just clicked in my head that I find this convincing. So I'm now tentatively a theist, but I don't have any religious affiliation.
Yeah, I think I have very similar position as you. I mean, I just like to call myself like optimistic theist, like the reason why I'm optimistic is like because like omnibenevolence, so like I believe God is omnibenevolent. So that's the reason for my like optimism and stuff. Like, and there's of course like there are like universalist Christians, like Josh Rasmussen and others, and I think they have like really good arguments for universalism, and I think those arguments do not necessarily require like Christianity. You just need omnibenevolence, and I think that can work with that, suppose. So like, do you believe in like God is omnibenevolent, like that, anything?
Yeah, so I haven't thought too much about models of God, but I think a God who was either evil or semi-benevolent would just be a less simple hypothesis, and so it would end up being a worse explanation for the data.
Yeah. So okay, I suppose. Like, by the way, do you watch movies?
I do. Yeah.
Do you love movies?
I love movies. I love movies.
Have you watched that movie like 1917?
No. No, I haven't. I think a friend of mine who went to my old school, his dad directed that, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, I mean it's Sam Mendes who directed
Yeah.
that movie, right? Yeah, it's a masterpiece. Like the music by Thomas Newman is just brilliant. Have you heard of Thomas Newman?
No, I haven't.
Like he's a great musician. Musician. Yeah. Okay, great. So I suppose we should just talk about like Pascal's wager. You wanted to share your screen, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought you said we were going to be reacting to Amanda Askell and Elizabeth Jackson later on. I thought I just sort of.
Sorry,
go
ahead.
Yeah, I thought I'd just sort of like summarize the argument I was giving in that paper, just very quickly to set the tone of the kind of arguments we're going to be giving.
Yeah, of course.
So. All good?
Okay, I can see your presentation.
Yeah, perfect. So this is just kind of a short argument. It's published in Philosophia. It's available online as a PDF if anyone wants to read it. But here's the gist. It's essentially a reductio argument for Pascal's wager. So it doesn't specify a premise in the argument that goes wrong. It just argues that the conclusion of Pascal's wager under the right circumstances is absurd. And so that gives you some reason to suspect that somewhere in the argument something went wrong. So in decision theory, you have agents and states. The agents are the people who are making the choices, and the states are the situations they find themselves in about which they have to choose. So our agent is Lenny. You can see him on the screen. I didn't draw this. I found him on Google Images. But yeah, so here's Lenny. That's the agent. The state he's in is that he was raised from birth in a cult called irrationalism. For our purposes, you know, irrationalism is a very intellectually rich worldview, but for our purposes, it only has about 4 points that we need to consider. So first, it believes that there's a deity known by adherents as Lord Dum-Dum, and Lord Dum-Dum hates rationality and critical thinking. The basic reason is that he thinks that all human suffering has just stemmed from this one intellectual vice. But he also hates religious indoctrination. So he wants everyone to be irrationalists, but he doesn't want anyone to be indoctrinated into being irrationalists or to become irrationalists for irrational reasons. And so as a result, conversions have to be rational. And the final condition is that conversions also have to be instantaneous. Once you've assented to the conclusion that you ought to convert, then you have to convert immediately without a moment's hesitation. Otherwise, you're sent to hell for eternity. So this is the belief system that Lenny is raised within. Like you, Lenny doesn't believe in irrationalism because he thinks it's insane. Like he just thinks it's kind of bonkers. But he has some evidence for irrationalism, mainly from two sources. So the first was that when he was young, he went to a village festival where everyone was clanging pots and pans around a big statue of Lord Dum-Dum. And he and literally everyone else saw a small amount of fire just spurt from the statue's nostrils. Now, he's pretty confident that this was just a prank played by this local guy who had a TikTok account and likes to play pranks on religious cults, but he isn't sure, right? He has no proof. And one time when he was sort of watching his mother engage in religious practices like microwaving her foot, he had a sort of mild religious experience. He went into a kind of trance-like state. He experienced the sense of the divine. And so he has these two sources of evidence, right? A mild, non-specific religious experience and a miracle, which he's pretty sure isn't a miracle. But still, that's some evidence that raises his credence in irrationalism to around 3%. And the reason it's so high is because he hasn't encountered any other religions in his life, because he's been raised inside of this insular community. And so when he turns 18, he goes off to university. And the university doesn't expose him to religious teachings either, right? Because it's a secular modern university, and so he's not exposed to all the other religious worldviews. But he takes a philosophy course, and his philosophy professor introduces him to Pascal's wager. And he's not convinced at first, but he goes to the library and he reads books about it and he thinks about it. And at some point, it just clicks in his mind that he finds it a persuasive piece of reasoning. But now he's stuck with this problem, right? Because he has a 3% credence in irrationalism, which promises an infinite afterlife to adherents of it. But his credence in other afterlife promising religions aren't any higher than that. They're lower than 3%. And because a condition of irrationalism is that you have to instantaneously convert, he just instantaneously starts doing irrational things, like he scales Nelson's column dressed in bubble wrap, and he whack-a-mole with pigeons and so forth. And so I think the reality that's insane. Like I don't think anyone thinks that Lenny rationally should have done any of these things. And yet Pascal's wager recommends that for Lenny as his rational course of action. And so that's the reductio. It seems like the wrong result, and yet it's what Pascal's wager delivers. There are lots of objections you can give. I submitted this paper a bunch of times to a bunch of different journals before it was finally accepted. And yeah, go on.
No, I mean, go on. Sorry.
Okay. So yeah, I basically got a bunch of different objections from reviewers, which were really helpful. And they all thought that the argument was wrong, and obviously so, but they all gave different reasons why it was obviously wrong. Each one of them, probably about 9 of them, they gave like a different objection. So I consider a bunch of them in my paper. But the best ones are probably 2, and I'll just share those with you to consider. So the first is that converting to this religion is actually impossible, right? And so since ought implies can, it's not the case that Lenny ought to have converted to irrationalism. And so the motivation for thinking that it's impossible is just reflect, like you just need to turn off all of your critical thinking forever. You would at some point lapse, maybe after about a minute, into reason. And if you do, then you might be sent to hell for eternity. And so my strategy with this kind of response is just to stipulate something small about the religion, such that it avoids this objection, but such that once we've added the stipulation, it still seems really implausible that Lenny should convert. So what I say in the paper is, Lord Dum-Dum, if he exists, doesn't punish lapses. Those are only natural. No, Lord Dum-Dum only punishes those lapses which are conscious, intentional, and prolonged. If Lenny were to notice himself slipping into a coherent frame of mind and then, say, devise clever wordle strategies instead of, say, yelling, "Free the Jaffa Cakes," and attempting to do a bottle flip with a dead pigeon, then and only then would Lord Dum-Dum lay his wrath upon him. Plausibly, this tiny amendment to the story does nothing to weaken its absurdity. Lenny's irrationality would still be rationally inescapable, since, presumably, a 2 to 3 second lapse into reason is nowhere near enough time to be persuaded out of one religion and into another. And so I think once we've made this stipulation, it still seems wildly implausible that Lenny should convert, and so that constitutes some evidence against Pascal's wager. Another objection that I thought was pretty good was one of the reasons why irrationalism and converting to irrationalism strikes us as so horrifying is that it seals off your opportunity to consider other religions, right? Because if you're behaving irrationally and you're not using critical thinking, then you can't consider all of the other alternatives. You can't consider Mormonism or Islam or Christianity or Judaism. And so the objection goes, Lenny should have factored that opportunity cost into his decision making, and that should have stopped him from converting, the fact that the opportunity cost was so high. And so my response is just that Lenny's university didn't prepare him by teaching him about other religions, and so he didn't have a full grasp of the opportunity cost. So irrationalists, bless them, are not the world's best educators. As a result, Lenny learned little to nothing about other world religions. And the modern university system, overcome with scientism and secularism and green hair and who knows what else, didn't help Lenny to learn much in that regard either. The result, of course, is that Lenny's near total ignorance of other religions ensures evidence in the that whatever value Lenny assigns to bet hedging is going to be outweighed by Lord Dum-Dum's demand for Lenny to convert immediately. And so once again, I think once we've made this stipulation to the case, it still seems wildly implausible that Lenny should convert. And so this reductio still constitutes some evidence against Pascal's wager. Now, on the whole, I don't think this argument succeeds. I still accept Pascal's wager. I think it's a good argument. But this argument gives me some reason to be worried.
Okay, so you accept Pascal's wager, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Well, I don't, right? So, I mean, there seems to be like other practical problems with Pascal's wager in my view. So you talked about like 2 objections, like converting is impossible, like to your argument, right? Like
Yeah.
the reductio argument. Converting is impossible, and another one was
he should have placed more value on the opportunity to consider other religions, and so the cost of that is something that he should have factored in to his decision more. Yeah, but I would always think like if there is a God who is willing to give you infinite punishment, infinite torture, negative infinite utility, or like infinite suffering, then he can ask you to do a lot of things right now that that are quite messed up to normal people right now. Yeah. It's like if an ISIS foot soldier beheads someone,
for apostasy, blasphemy, not even praying properly. It's like if a Christian, traditionalist Christian who accepts Pascal's wager says, hey, you shouldn't do that. Well, the ISIS person can reply, well, how dare you? You already believe that God will do like the strongest punishment. God will like dish out the strongest punishment, the most horrifying punishment, but we cannot do something weaker, something weak punishment. Maybe like forget like death penalty for blasphemy or apostasy. Maybe something it's like 5 years of brutal torture. Brutal, like really brutal. A lot of messed up things they do to you for like apostasy, blasphemy, idolatry, I think idolatry is like a crime. Yeah. Polytheism, basically. And also not like praying, which is an obligation. Worshipping is an obligation. Like, I don't know if you were a Catholic. Were you a Catholic?
I was a Catholic.
Okay, so Catholics believe that going to Mass every Sunday is
only their obligation. Yeah,
it's an obligation, and if you do not, go out of laziness or something, like I just do not feel like it, then well, you're done, right? You have to repent.
Yeah, so it's usually a mortal sin. It could be a venial sin, I think, but for most Catholics who are committed, it's going to be a mortal sin, and so you need to confess that.
Yeah, confess that, right? So that's one thing with like Pascal's wager. It's like, I mean, you like, if you accept Pascal's wager, I'm assuming you would join. Like, technically, you would not have objections to joining ISIS or Taliban, because, I mean, it seems to me like, if you already believe in like God can do infinite torture to someone, then how, like, why? I mean, it's strange to me that someone would object to ISIS or Taliban, like, I mean, if they already believe there is infinite torture for like these victimless crimes, right? Like apostasy. I mean, blasphemy might be like a crime that has a victim, which is God, but like apostasy and, idolatry, and polytheism do not seem to be like crimes that have a victim, crimes that has a victim. So like, that's my one objection to like Pascal's wager personally. And yeah, I think that's personally that is a major objection. It's like, let me show you like Amanda Eskel's like article, So let me share my screen, I suppose. Okay, can you see my screen?
So I can see Elizabeth Jackson's paper. I can see your screen.
Okay, great. So in like her blog, common objections to Pascal's wager, Amanda says this to this question, right? So this is the question. Like, you can read, you are able to read this, right? Like, is it like too small or something?
No, I can read it. Yeah, so doesn't the wager promote an unethical life of belief over an ethical life of non-belief?
Yeah, and then she says like, in principle, the wager could promote this, but I don't see any reason to think that this is overwhelmingly likely. It doesn't necessarily favor adopting a religion unflinchingly. But I mean, this is very weird to me. I mean, unflinchingly, like, wait, some religions, traditionalist religions, have like rules. You cannot like obey like 9 out of 10 commandments, and then expect that you will get to heaven with that. If you break any commandment, you are also done for, and you need to.
It might be that what she means by unflinchingly is that you're not allowed to be tentative in your religious commitments. So when you commit to a religion, you should do so wholeheartedly, but you should still be able to consider other religions at the same time and be prepared to deconvert. So that might be what unflinchingly means.
Okay, that might be it, I suppose. But All right. So, and then she says, if we are more confident that God is more if we are more confident that God is more non-malevolent than not. I mean, this just sounds funny to me. Like,
Yeah.
it just sounds like really funny. It's so weird. It's a weird
Yeah.
statement to me. Like, wait, like you are already conceding that God is like not a utilitarian. Like, I think Amanda might be some sort of utilitarian because she's like effective altruist or something.
Mm-hmm.
So you're already conceding that God is not some kind of utilitarian, because I mean, if he was, then eternal hell would be out of the question unless you like limit the omnipotence of God in some sense, and like like metaphysically like say that
Yeah.
like he just has to create a world where just this one guy will suffer forever, but the pleasure of others will like overcome all that pain, because utilitarianism, simple utilitarianism, by the way, like there are other versions of utilitarianisms, like desert adjusted versions, and others, but like this is like really weird to me. This seems to me like if he is omnipotent and omniscient and omnibenevolent, I mean, if he's omnipotent and omniscient and also like has some people suffering forever eternally, and again, that suffering forever is not like very mild kind of suffering that stretches out to infinity or something. Like, what I mean by that, like technically, if like every year someone, you like, for example, for whole year you're happy, but like every year someone just punches you, right, or punches me, right? So first year being punched, let's just suppose that's like a punishment, then like second year punishment, same, and third year, fourth year, and continuously you just stretch that out. So technically you are suffering infinitely, but you still have like infinite pleasure overall.
Mhm.
Like the distributions of pleasures and suffering are such that you're
Yeah.
always on like really positive. But Pascal's wager, like at least the original one, that is not like modified by, I suppose, Liz Jackson, right? Like Liz Jackson has like different wagers she talked about, like there's one for universalism. there's
Yeah.
there's one for annihilationism or something. I mean, but like if you already believe that God can do this horrific thing to someone,
Mhm.
then I mean, just nonsense to me that you would then stipulate, hey, maybe he's not that bad, even though he's like torturing someone forever. Maybe he's not that bad, like maybe it's sweet with like people who like obey some of his commands. Maybe some of the commands could be weird too, who knows? Like, I always found it really weird that like idolatry is like a major sin. Like, I mean, I was a Hindu, by the way, so polytheism there, so I always found it weird to me, like he would command people to like do that, uh, you know so yeah, so like this was like a really weird thing, and I think this just really, personally, it's just really frustrating to me, like how can you just do that, if you already believe, if you already like concede that Pascal's wager is a good argument, that you are already
Mhm.
conceding that God is not a utilitarian. God is also not probably a virtue ethicist, God is also not like a deontologist, yeah. So like,
Okay. So should we try and like break this objection down into bits, so we can kind of really think it through?
yeah,
So
sure.
um, I sort of heard two objections there. So one way your argument could be interpreted is that
Yeah.
The fact that somebody could, on Pascalian grounds, become an ISIS beheader is just really strong evidence against Pascal's wager, because that's such a crazy conclusion. And then the other one is, if the God that you put into the wager is one who also inflicts infinite disutilities on those who disobey him, then everything is going to be lawful, and it's going to become okay to punish people for committing sins, even though those sins don't harm other people, and that's morally wrong. So are those both the objections that you're endorsing?
Yeah, I suppose like the second one can be more like, it's about God, not just ISIS.
Yeah.
It's about like God can do a lot of other things to you, right?
Yeah.
Like how are you so sure like you will get the heaven and the utility will remain positive? Like maybe in heaven people can like do some stupid shit and then like they go to eternal hell.
Yeah.
You know, even in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I
So
mean,
should we think through a
yes.
a universalist version of the wager, and then see where you disagree with that, and then
Yeah,
maybe
of
once
course.
we're done with that, we can hop on to the versions of the wager that involve hell as well.
Yeah, sure.
The universalist version of the wager is going to be something like possibly there are different levels of heaven or different levels of closeness that you can be to God in heaven, depending on what you do in this life. You may not think that's likely, but it's an epistemic possibility, right? It could be true.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, converting in this life still strictly dominates not converting in this life. It's still the better choice because it's a greater infinity. And so it's an infinite utility over and above the infinite utility of going to heaven at a lower level.
Yeah.
So what's your objection to that, Major?
I mean, it's like it's like God saying I can give some people like happiness that's like very, very enjoyable, and then I can also do like give people like lives that are barely worth living. Like lives that are barely worth living does have positive utility, you know, +1 maybe if you want to think about that. So like God can do like stuff like, though those who believed in me, you know, obeyed my commands, will get like the best version of heaven forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those who didn't, well, depending on how many commands they broke or something, depending on how many commands they broke, they will get like, you know, second-class citizenship, you know, maybe third-class citizenship or something, or maybe like some torture. And then I mean, the objection to like that kind of universalism for me is still like a moral objection. It's like, why is God doing that? Like he's omnibenevolent, right? Why is he doing that?
So it could be something like this, right? In this life, just in virtue of the relationships we stand to people, we stand to different people through no choice of our own. That can sort of make those relationships more valuable to us than any other relationship, even if somebody else works really hard at it. So the relationship I have to my family is always going to be a level up from the relationship I have to anyone else, just in virtue of them being my family. And so if somebody saves my life, the same thing, right? I just have this special connection to them in virtue of the fact that they have saved my life. And so all else being equal, if they both try equally hard to be my friend, I'll still have a more valuable relationship with the person who saved my life. And so it could be similar to our relationship to God. So if somebody chooses to convert now on earth, that creates a more valuable relationship than someone who converts later in the afterlife. And so the people who converted now, the Mother Teresa's, they will have always for eternity a leg up over the people who don't in terms of the value of their relationships to God. And so it's not necessarily that God's just segregating heaven between the people who have a really great time and the people who have a really, really, really great time in virtue of the fact that they converted on earth. It could be something to do with just the value of their relationships in virtue of the fact that they did convert on earth.
So correct me if I'm wrong, you know, like what you said about what you said. I'm going to repeat what you said.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, just like you have like relationship with your family that is like very close compared to like relationships with like other people, right?
Yeah.
So people who convert right now in this world will have that special kind of relationship.
Mhm.
Than the people who convert like in the next life or something. So it's like the sooner you convert, the better deal you get.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to talk about it in the language of deals. It's just like, if you convert now under these more trying circumstances on Earth, if you do it earlier rather than later, then that's really, really great. And so the relationship that you form with God, just in virtue of that, will be closer and more intimate. Or the relationship forms later on. If you're one of the latecomers, your relationship with God will still be special, but the relationships formed by those earlier in their life on Earth are just going to be more special in virtue of the fact that they made that choice.
Like, yeah, I mean, like the angels, suppose the angels exist and God created them first.
Yeah.
So they have like more special, closer relationship to God than like people who are here right now, you know.
Maybe, but it's not just in terms of who got to God first, in terms of who was created first. It could just be for any given person, no matter where in time they exist, the earlier on in their life they converted, or something like that, or just if they converted on Earth as opposed to in the afterlife, then that's going to be more special.
Okay. I mean, I don't know, that still sounds very strange. Like, suppose like someone who converted right now was like a murderer, you know, it's that kind of murderer, serial killer, and he literally converted because Pascal's wager, egoistic kind of reason. And then like some other, atheist, like, Graham Oppie, or like an agnostic, like the most brilliant agnostic, like Joe Schmidt, he's great, he's compassionate, he doesn't convert, suppose, lifelong he is an agnostic. So the serial killer who repented in this life, right, but did not have any compassion, was purely for egoistic reasons. He like to save his own, skin. Then technically Joe, our friend Joe, best friend, like, our friend Joe will have like second-class citizenship because he converted in the next life forever. While that serial killer,
Yeah, I mean, you stipulated about the serial killer case that he converted for egoistic reasons. And I think a conversion for purely egoistic reasons, not God-focused reasons, is going to be insincere. And so it won't count as a real conversion. And at the same time, you might think that people who are actively pursuing God with their minds and their hearts, and they're just not quite seeing it, they're just not quite seeing the evidence line up, that really is forming a relationship with God during this life.
I mean, okay.
And so,
let's
in that case, Joe goes to heaven and the serial killer doesn't.
Okay, let's just stipulate the serial killer did convert because of
genuinely and not for egoistic reasons.
Genuine guilt, like genuine guilt. He felt really bad that he did messed up.
Yeah.
All that. He probably, so he converted in this life. Now Joe is an agnostic, like at least he doesn't seem to have like so I mean, Joe is an agnostic, he has not like killed anyone, So by the way, the meeting is going to finish soon, so we should like start again. By the way, are you on Discord?
Yeah, I think I just joined it.
Can I send you an email, or do you want me to send you a Discord link?
I won't have Discord open yet, but maybe just send an email. That will probably be easier.
Okay, yeah, sure. Okay.
Thanks. So yeah, shall I just hop off now?
Yeah.
Okay.